We are here tonight to discuss Mrs. Benedict Arnold. Emma Parry is a fabulous literary agent born in New York, has followed the Pilgrim's Path to come here and live in the Hudson Valley. She has an excellent career, excellent track record in books, but when she heard the story of a woman who possibly could have ended the American Revolution and changed history forever, she had no choice but to write down that book. Please join me in welcoming Miss Emma Parry! And I suppose I'll be filling in for a couple of Q&As here while we're waiting for Jodie to arrive. Hi, Emma, how are you doing tonight?
Ready to eat.
Oh, that's no trouble here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about how you came into this book? Is this your first novel that you've written, or have you written before?
It's the first published.
Oh,
novel. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
Please speak into the microphone.
Yes, is that better? That's okay? Yes. I think it's okay. I mean, that sounds loud to me. But yes, I had done some ghostwriting and I'd written a couple of novels which came close and didn't get there, all that agony, and then gone back to work. I was just looking for another big project because it is so fun being an agent. You're kind of walk around quite thinly, working on 3 or 4 books at any one time, at any one week. And so I missed the chance of going deeper. And I remember just quite clearly asking what's next when we were in a very relaxed place on an island in Maine, and then just turning and picking up the Nathaniel Philbrick book and seeing reference to the young wife and mother who changed the course of American history. And I was just like, what? Who? I don't know that story. I'd heard of him, but I didn't know about her, and I hadn't seen it framed in such an arresting way. And when I dug a bit deeper and saw, she'd been this military wife, married to arguably one of the greatest generals we've had, and yet she secretly schemed for peace. That just seemed so fascinating to me. I come from quite a military family, and the idea of a woman undermining her husband's best efforts. I wanted to know why. And also the fact that she was a friend with Washington, Hamilton, Lafayette. How could she have missed the way the wind was going? So the more I read, the more intrigued I became, and I felt, as I did read on, that she had been quite unfairly treated. First of all, massively condescended to, because nobody alive at the time thought she was capable of it. And she fooled Washington, Hamilton, and Lafayette over a couple of days in her bedroom interrogation, and they were completely capable of believing in her guilt. And then even hundreds of years later, when it became clear that she had been guilty, she was still sort of disregarded. I'm sorry.
Jodie Foster.
Hi everyone. It is a pleasure to be here. A native New Yorker, actually the rookie move. I only gave myself an extra hour. That was coming from Brooklyn. And I have to put my glasses in my little bag that's on the table. Thank you. Can I use this to share closer to you? I need a few minutes to set this scene, if you don't mind, and before we jump right in. Thanks. So, I'm a writer, and a baby writer in the scheme of things. I've written 2 books. One was called The Bold World, and Alice Walker said it was marvelous. The other one is called Born Ready, thank you. And it found itself at the center of a Supreme Court case recently, which we lost. But it changed the way American schooling will move forward. Both of these books centered trans people, transgender people. Now this was 10 years ago. Not many people were talking about being trans or talking about loving people who were transgender. And definitely not Black folks that I knew. But Emma saw something in me, and I set out, and she agreed to represent me. One of the most notable, prestigious agencies known. So I had this idea that I would write a book that was sort of a blueprint or a roadmap for moms, telling us what to do, where to go, doctor by doctor, ally by ally, school by school, how to be safe raising trans kids, like a roadmap. And Emma, it was a small idea, and I had a bigger idea. And she asked me this question, she said, who raised you? Who was the woman or the people who allowed you to show up for your son the way you did? That one question redirected the whole process of writing and what I actually put out into the world. Emma found my story compelling, transformative, newsworthy, potentially a New York Times bestselling book. All of those but one were true. Since then, I was elected as the chair of the country's largest LGBT organization, Human Rights Campaign. I have been able to be a leader in the gender revolution, not only as a chair of an organization, but as a really fully active person. I say all that not to put the spotlight on me, but to show how Emma sees things that other people do not, early on. So when I asked, Emma said she chooses stories that are arresting, with new ideas and worlds I haven't seen before. I believe Emma chooses based on subversive stories, something that lies somewhere hidden within and under the more obvious story. Born in England, Emma is now living in America, up in this part of the woods, I believe, with her family. She's a wife and a mother. Emma is not a spy.
Yeah, upset not to be asked.
Yeah, so perhaps, I don't know, maybe it's going to come out. We all know you differently after this time. But as far as I know, she's not a spy. She's not necessarily subversive. I'm not even sure how political she is. Maybe I'm wrong about that. But I do know she's curious. Emma is also a very smart woman. We've had many conversations over the years, and I've had to really jot down all the words that Emma says after a phone call, during the phone call, so that I could go back and ponder the words that Emma said so I could understand what Emma was saying. Sometimes she speaks in tongues. She first came across a reference to the young wife and mother whose loyalist learnings changed the course of the nation in a book by Nathaniel Philbrick. And that was a decade ago. And from then, Emma has researched and imagined Peggy's story in every hour since. Off hour. She never sacrificed her career. The woman of the hour has dozens of groundbreaking books under her belt, but I believe this book, Mrs. Benedict Arnold, steals the show. Please welcome the woman of the hour, Emma Parry. What does it feel like to be on this end of the equation?
So much more uncomfortable.
Was writing the book as hard as you made it for your authors? And I say that. Emma never left anything on the table. She said, no, go back, rethink that, go further, tell me more. Actually, don't tell me, just show it to me differently, over and over and over again. Was it hard for you? Were you as hard on yourself?
That's funny. I think I was, but I thought it was Peggy, the character, who was doing that rather than me. Yeah, because I tried to write it as non-fiction, because it is based on a true story, and you know, if it can be told as a true story, then I thought it ought to be. And I teamed up with a historian to vet everything I was doing, and that was actually really reassuring, because I could map out exactly what had happened, but also where the gaps were. And in fact, you know, it was a secret undertaking that she was involved in, so there was not enough to make a really good narrative work of non-fiction. But I still couldn't shake it, and just kept living with it, and so tried to imagine it. And first of all, I wrote it in a third-person version that found I was falling into the same mistakes we were just talking about before you came, and I was condescending towards her because she was beautiful, so she was stupid, or, you know, she was involved in a scheme, so she was a, you know, scheming, husky slut. I mean, people have been really nasty at her over the years, and yet what I saw was more appealing.
Can you just give us, first of all, does everyone know the details of this story?
Yeah.
Okay. Can you give us a snapshot of the conspiracy, just quick bullet points so we can get, because this is so loosely understood by almost everyone, but not quite specifically. So give us a little image of it.
Peggy Tiffin was born into a very prosperous family in Philadelphia, third, fourth generation of prominent citizens there, and they had been loyalists, as most loyalists were, until things started to rupture. When the British occupied the city, she was about 17, and she became the vast favourite of the British occupying forces, and particularly the British Social Secretary, who was a man called John Andre.
And what was appealing about her?
She was, I mean, supposed to be completely captivating, but, you know, often referred to as the most beautiful woman in America and a great conversationalist, and just, a favourite of everyone that she met. She was well educated, so, you know, presumably bright and quick. Yes, and even after her disgrace, you know, people still found her incredibly lovable, like her husband. So she got very close to the British, and she was enlisted by John Andre, who was the second in command, or the third in command amongst the British forces. So right at the top, not that far removed from the king, certainly in Peggy's mind. And he was living in Benjamin Franklin's house, so surrounded by all of these extraordinary inventions that mind had produced. And he asked her to come and help plot a big party, really. It was part party, part propaganda. They called it the Mischiana. Right. To show, you know, how splendid and inarguable the strength of the British forces were. So they got quite close during that process, and she was, you know, creatively very involved in the war. She was then forbidden from attending, fell for him. He left town very abruptly. She was devastated, and quite, you know, actually the same day after the British left, Arnold arrived in town to be the new military governor of Philadelphia.
She was devastated, but she flipped easily, quickly.
She shifted.
Yes.
Yeah.
Nothing was going to stop her.
No, she was interested, curious alive, yeah. And she was pleasantly surprised by him, because there had been so many stories told about this, you know, crippled old general. I think she imagined him much more infirm than he then presented himself as being. He was pretty handsome and appealing too. I've been more sympathetic to him than other people have over the years. Because I wanted to see what it was like at the time, rather than with too much weight of hindsight. Anyway, they became close. They quite quickly married, and soon after they married, she introduced Arnold to Andre, who by that point was the head of British intelligence, the first time anyone had held that role, and conspired to end the war. Yeah. Okay.
So she was a conniving.
I think she was hugely creative at least, because I don't think it mattered to her which side won so much as bringing the hated war to a stop.
Bringing it to an end.
Yeah.
So I want to ask a question. Well, first of all, how did you find empathy or I guess empathy with her? I mean, you could have created her as a really hard to like person, but from the opening page, I'm going to read one thing after ask this question. From the opening page, I loved her.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
So glad.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree with that too.
Is that real, or did you find that the idea of maybe no one liking her, no one liking the book, changed the way you wrote her?
People had written books before that were quite successful, and I guess people, you know, liked well, which did demonise her. But I wasn't very interested in. I'm not going to want to linger for years and years with someone I don't like. That's the thing. There's enough to do.
And this was a 10-year process, correct?
Right.
10 years of research and writing.
Yeah. So there wasn't that much. But I looked at the bare bones of what she'd done, and the fact that it was meant to be completely victimless, end the war, a war which had gone on all her conscious life. I mean, I know everyone knows the date of the Revolutionary War off by heart in this country, but for a girl who was 17, it was everything she had known. The fear and the dread of it was just completely surrounding her. And those, 6 years got old. And then once she was pregnant, I just believe she really wanted it to be over. She used the fact of her pregnancy to ignite the correspondence with Andre and told him that in code. And so I think that was her pressing motivation for it all. And then in terms of what she was like, her voice in the surviving correspondence, there isn't very much, but it's very wry, funny, like a curious, intrepid survivor, not bitter. And I liked it.
I liked her too, and I don't read a lot of, these days I don't read a lot of American history. I find it to be, it omits all the juicy stuff. It leaves too much on the table and doesn't bring it all to the story. But you made the story spicy, you made the story intentional. I think a lot of it was the lead character. I just want to read the opening, few opening lines because it reminded me of something. So I was asleep when the first shot came, dreaming I was crossing an ocean Cold salt spray misting my skin, dread churning along with the restless swell. Conflicting updates arrived at intervals, a big win for one side, their complete defeat. With no idea what to wish for, I searched the faces of older women for clues to their bewildering conviction. First of all, she sounds black to me. I don't know if you had this memo, but when we were young, our moms and our aunties always said, look for the women, look for the older women, look at what they might not say, but look at their faces. They will tell you everything you need to know. And in the first paragraph, I was like, oh, yeah, I'm gonna finish reading this book. What was the writing process like? Were you bringing in a lot of potential, or was this based on the character that had been documented in some way, or were you imagining? Because she feels very spicy, like I said, but she also feels very modern sometimes, and contrarian, and I will win at all costs. So what is that word? Determined.
Yeah, she's capable of being very ruthless, I think.
Ruthless, I think.
Yeah.
That's a big one. Was this factual?
Well, her actions were fairly ruthless, right? I mean, she was prepared to betray Washington and Hamilton and Lafayette in that way. But yeah, I didn't see anything unpleasant in her motivations, and I quite find her likable just for having made such a massive, spectacular mistake. I think that's interesting in itself, and we think that,
Which is?
well, she chose, the wrong gamble, right? It didn't work. In fact, she did actually manage to accelerate the outcome of the American patriots prevailing, but not as she'd intended, just by galvanizing, opposition to Benedict so strongly that it allowed a final push when the war had actually been very, very uncertain at that time. But how I got married, I learned everything I possibly could about her, everything everyone had said about her at the time and since. I read her letters, I read a lot of her father's letters to her. The family had destroyed most of her responses, but just in their banter, and he was really fun, like the dad in Emma, the Jane Austen novel, just funny, and then sometimes intentionally funny. You could get a sense of their kind of banter and repartee and how desperately anxious they both were about war, how they were just trying to sort of navigate the path.
What's good about Peggy's story for the world? Is there something that you were trying to show us or?
Well, I know I wanted to understand, because I was writing it a lot, taking the train back and forth down the Hudson, and always with 9 other things to read for clients, but West Point just kept looming up back and forth and insisting on attention again. And at the same time, well, I'd just become a citizen myself, and there was definitely a real commitment and interest in learning about how this country started. So it was very fun to go in there and linger and learn about those characters and try to bring them to life. And also, for the last 10 years, we've all been contending with this horrifying, boring, intractable division between red and blue of Europe, and all the constant talk that civil war might be imminent, and that this, political unpleasantness could tip into actual violence, which would threaten my children, their friends, and ruin a generation. It made it very vivid what she was contending with at that time. And I also like the fact that she was brave while being conciliatory. I think often people think that unless you're at the far end of the political spectrum, really activating to change, in the middle, that maybe there's a kind of cowardice that's implicit. And I think she shows that by being peace-seeking and actually quite moderate, it's still possible to show incredible creativity and courage. And so though it failed, I think it's worth studying.
I'm curious to know, we both have daughters in our young adults. What did your daughters think about her as a character and the story in general?
I don't even know how much they take it in.
Do they know what you do professionally? That's something that I don't do.
They hear me talking about the books that I represent enough, because I often use that as a test. I mean, if I want to talk to my family, my kids and my husband about a book, that tells me that I've got the interest to go the distance in representing it. And for sure, I have banged on about Peggy too, and taken it to Philadelphia here and there. But they haven't read it, and I don't mind if they don't.
Exactly. Just let that be. Sometimes it's nice to have a little bit of distance between you and your child and something that's really important to you, because they might not be kind. with their words.
But also, my husband's mother was a novelist, and he and she had one of the nicest relationships I can imagine. But he didn't feel compelled to read her books.
Yeah. You know, I always had an idea that writing books would be sort of similar to what I imagined Toni Morrison to write. In a room by herself, in a chair, sort of stiff, dim lights, something in her cup, in her glass that she might be sipping slowly, alone for months, quiet. And of course, mysterious, right? And for me, it was quite the opposite of that. I hired someone, as you know, to help as an editor to guide me and to give me structure. I mean, the first chapter, she pretty much held the pen for me in my hand, and by the last chapter, I was like, "Don't touch a thing, not a word, don't edit anything." My process was in collaboration. What was your process like when you wrote this? Because you did have a big career, you have a family, you are helping other people with their dreams and their books. How did you write this?
Slowly, that's why it took such a long time. Yeah. And it was actually only when my younger child went off to college that I really thought I can let the job have this time, all of it, but I might have been making snacks and hearing about the day, or I can finally finish this piece and get it done, and that's what actually happened. But so the writing was a bit more on the sly, applied to my holidays and weekends. I love things like Emma Parry Day, because no one's working, and I can get on with it.
Do you consider Peggy a feminist?
I mean, it would be anachronistic to say, right? But obviously I've been influenced by feminism over the years, and I definitely was really excited to find a heroine, because I love an 18th century heroine. And I am very, very interested in all the dating machinations and finding a husband and everything else that goes on, but sometimes I was a bit frustrated in those Austen novels, and I do not want to sound like I'm nagging Jane.
What was frustrating?
Well, just that the soldiers were in the periphery, and the actual kind of pressing issues of the day were very much relegated to sort of background context, cleverly intimated and dealt with, like the genius, for sure, but it was fun to find the characters. It was also having romantic entanglements, a massive spy adventure, all sorts of drama, but also knew all the key players of her age and had her hand on the sort of fate in that way. I mean, like you find a queen maybe who had that kind of influence, but it's unusual to find just a civilian young woman.
So is that a yes or a no?
You'll have to tell me.
No, I'm not finished it. And I will. This is one of the few books I've had a hard time finishing books. I don't know if raise your hand if that is you as well. It takes me longer to get through books where I used to just devour them. And this one has my attention, but I'm still a slow reader.
I think it has a problem with the whole publishing. You see,
There
used to be a time when people would say, yes, I read a book about it, or something would happen in Iran, and people would buy that non-fiction books about it in large numbers, and then maybe they'd say, I remember the first time I heard a writer say, yeah, I read a whole article about that. And it's like, oh, Jesus. And now people will actually just say, oh, yeah, I read a headline. Yeah, because we're all just moving so much faster, so, yeah, it's hard.
Are you attached in the way that you would have been with my book, like the marketing of it and the pushing of it and the success of it? Do you have that same attachment, that same desire?
I mean, I feel an obligation. To her, still, first and foremost, as a character, she has been really insistent.
In your dreams?
It would be so awful to think, yeah, really, the voice and, yeah. But how awful is she's actually sort of susurrating around, really frustrated with how I completely distorted her. That would be so bad. But yes, I did get quite attached to her.
And the marketing, I'm just curious to know. I think it's a problem in the industry.
Yeah.
I don't, first of all, there's an abundance of everything out there, movies, television, podcasts, but I don't find that the publishing industry is innovative in how they get the book out and how they get the woman out.
They're really struggling, I think.
Yeah.
What used to work just doesn't work, and there are so many things that are counterintuitive. You get some podcasts where the author goes on and talks for 3 hours, which you would think might cannibalize book sales, but actually don't. Drives them really well, but most other coverage, like a really nice New Yorker review, can just erode sales in that way, so it is tricky. And I think the most
your book band.
Yeah, that's helpful. That's very helpful. But that is a problem, and the social media stuff that is now an obligation is very
Right.
uncomfortable.
And is that something that you'll think about doing social media around it?
They hire like teams. So,
Yeah.
I said to a friend just now, feel free to unfollow me until this is over.
Show of hands, who is on a social media platform? Who uses a social media platform for information? Okay, maybe half. Yeah. Okay, here's a question I've been meaning to ask. So oftentimes we consider peace a female thing and war a masculine thing. So who do you think understood the psychology of war better, Peggy or the men she was twirling around her finger?
That's so interesting. What a good question. I mean, certainly like tactics and strategy, you would have to say he knew how to actually win a battle and get that done. But he also then came to know, complete physical collapse. He had the most appalling injuries, and still people accused him of being a malingerer and disliked him. But his leg was basically pulp at the fan. And so I think he would have understood a lot about how that initial exhilaration of engagement might quite quickly dissipate and leave you with a long sort of slog of hell. And then to see the bickering between, so, it feels very contemporary between Congress and leadership about financing war, getting soldiers paid, veterans being so badly treated. The discrepancy between the glorious rhetoric of the Declaration of Independence, which is still so inspiring, and the reality that soldiers were facing. It was just so dispiriting, I think. So that's all part of the reality of war. And the women behind worrying about it. War is as real for them as anyone else.
Women espionage and war, is there a larger trend that I don't know about? Like, are there other women that you would put in this category that were a bit ruthless behind the scenes and had an impact?
And in the Second World War, right, Sebastian Folkes wrote a very good novel called Charlotte Gray. I mean, there were lots of interesting women in the resistance who'd been written about a bunch. But I don't know going back that far. I would like to know if anyone does know.
Are there other women that you know of? I mean, this is a story that it could be a movie. It should be a movie.
Shonda, come on.
Yes. What was the most interesting part about writing?
Well, when in those rare moments where they all came alive, I'd read enough of the correspondence that I could have a conversation between Lafayette and Peggy and Hamilton and Washington. That was really, really fun. It just felt really fun. For a minute, and then it's just slogged again for hours.
And do you see writing again something similar or not at all?
It would be nice if it didn't take quite so much research and time to do something else again. I don't know. I have a vague notion about another woman, historical, but much more recent in the 1940s, who did a tremendous amount of good too, but also made a spectacular, super resonant mistake. So she's interesting here, better to know.
I'm sorry, who was it?
I'm person.
Did you say? No, we're not reading that one out.
It's 10 years or so.
There's some great lines that Peggy says in the book. One of them that I really like is, make no mistake. She said, I say make no mistake, Peggy does not want to be led. She says things like, I like doing what I was told if I liked who was doing the telling. And then she says, to be told was annoying.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there a little Peggy in you? I don't know.
Yeah, I think every one of us would say there's a bit, but it's not. I'm nothing like as brave as her. But I was thinking about that line when you mentioned being spy. Am I? Couldn't possibly tell you, obviously. But I was thinking there was a time when I was at Cambridge, because everyone was saying you might get approached. It might just happen, and it was quite exciting to think that nod would come. In the same way that when I was at a convent school, and the head nun said, you won't have a choice any time now. God could just tap you on the shoulder and say that. Half excited, half terrified. But anyway, it would have depended in both cases on whether I liked the person coming and doing the beckoning. I think whether I could have fallen into some kind of secret scheme. But overall, she's way braver than.
And the men, tell me about the men. How did you write about them? Oftentimes when I was writing about family, I always thought in the back of my head, don't destroy their character. And people are so layered and complex. And I wanted to show some of the complicated aspects of the men in my life, but I also was very aware that I didn't want to destroy these Black men and the character that I felt was so necessary in the world. Is there a way that you had to write about the men or the women that you held as of value?
I mean, I think that stuff is easier with fiction, right, than with
Okay.
memoir. That is very, very hard. People struggle with it the whole time. I've worked on so many memoirs, and you know, how you had to struggle with that emotional excavation, what makes the cut, what doesn't. And even the most kind of telling memoir, there are often really key secrets that it's judged better to sort of keep back for people. And I think it's much, much harder, that work. You have to get to a point of just being another kind of fuck it about your family when you write a memoir. But with fiction, I don't think that's quite so difficult because it's all veiled. None of these people have anything to do with my family or anything.
No, but I think when we're looking at all of these, especially now in the context of what we're experiencing, so many decisions being made by men that have these global ramifications. And then here's a story about a woman who, the question is, how far will she go for peace?
Right.
How far will she go for something she wants, against perhaps what all of the men have decided?
Yeah.
And that, you know, I start to lean in towards the woman's story, and you know, I get very emotional, and I might even lean towards making her fantastic and then not so fantastic, because we see the history of men. But I'm just wondering, was there a point where you said, I can't show that because it would be too damaging, or did you leave anything out? Well, maybe not.
No, I was worried that people would think, well, I might still think, like hearing my accent, that I somehow actually wanted this to go the British way, which is not the truth. So I was worried when I told, you know, stories about how bad it was for the soldiers to make sense of why Benedict thought it couldn't be won by a lot of people. Brian thought the war couldn't be won by the Patriots. I wanted to be very careful about that, so I didn't feel like some kind of weird retrospective British propaganda. I was careful about that, trying to make it, you know. And there are characters from all sorts of perspectives. Right, her uncle is a really interesting senior patriot figure who's very important in her life. He's the chief medic for the Patriot Army, and she adores him. So there are lots of competing perspectives.
Who are the main characters? Just remind us who are the pivotal characters in this.
Main characters are Peggy herself, John Andre, the devilishly attractive chief of British intelligence, who still, it's funny, he was obviously incredibly attractive. Everyone in their letters was obsessed with him. Hamilton wrote in really quite weird ways about him. To be as attractive as he was, that he could captivate his wife in every way, in every particular. He was obviously very attractive. Actually, he was on the radio show the other day with an American academic. She was so serious and impressive in every way, but as soon as she started talking about Andre, she just started giggling like a girl. These years later, he had a big romantic role. Anyway, so there's her, there's him, and there's Benedict himself, who had been this phenomenal hero and was so beloved by his men as a real get right into it general rather than a sort of, you know, backseat driver, but not at all a competent politician and peevish and easily offended and just so much his own worst enemy at times. And then there's this fun pair of the spies who get her involved. Stan Spoon O'Dell, a poet, and he was actually a China dealer, but I made him a dressmaker so that could be the outlet of their time concoction scheme. And then had a great friend, as I have it, Theodosia Provost, and that was really quite a big investment.
These are all real characters, nothing
They're
else.
all real characters. But in Theodosia's case, she went on to marry Aaron Burr, so you might remember her from the musical too, and Burr is a character for sure. That was fun. But we just know that Peggy spent 2 nights at the home of Theodosia Provost, and we know that she also hosted both Patriots and the British and threw parties and managed to navigate the war with incredible kind of panache, really. And she was super intelligent and highly educated woman, interesting. So, and she was, it was said that Peggy had confided to Theodosia her role in the plan. And I just thought, well, if she had, that would be one of the best friend ever, right? So then it was fun to write her as an older, fantastic female friend.
Not a lot of diversity, though, in the story, right?
No, I mean, no.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put
No, but you know, her father had slaves, Washington slave appears, and they have peripheral scenes of like Shyla claiming great credit for his amazing farm, and there's halls of slaves actually making it possible, sort of thing. But it's all
in the background.
Right.
And how do you write a book now, today, being Emma, this person who's aware of everything, and you're writing a book about white sort of pedigree, white privilege, in a sense. It's a whole world.
Yeah.
that we know to be relevant historically, but there aren't any Black people, there aren't any queer people, there aren't any.
Queer couple. I've got a queer couple.
Oh, you do? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. One. But so my question is, were you noticing that as you were writing it?
Yes,
Mm-hmm.
but I wasn't going to insert someone.
Yeah.
And that could have been excruciating. It could have been a catastrophic mistake, right? I wasn't going to insert someone who wasn't there. I remember one of our earliest conversations about your book, and we talked about it all, and then you were like, but do I need a white character? And I was like, was there one? And you were like, no. And I'm like, no, there was not.
I mean, but Toni Morrison spoke a lot about not writing for the white gaze, and she was that was a big part of her conversation when the world would ask her, but what about the white people? And of course, it's different when you're white writing about white history. So that's why I asked, were you conscious of it? I know how eager you were for me to tell the full story and make sure that I was being true to my memory. But sometimes white memory can be very isolating.
Yeah. So I just tried to read as much as possible and make sure it was as representative as it could reasonably be, but I didn't want to start voicing characters that weren't there. You see the rising initiative amongst Quakers to abolish slavery. You know
that it's
my sense is that that Peggy and Benedict were completely aware of the hypocrisies and the cruelty and the absurdity of it all. Who was excluded from the Declaration of Independence? I don't think anyone bright would have missed that at the time. But I thought about it a bit like all of us today. There are still massive injustices. All of our privilege and comfort is built on the suffering of people somewhere else. And we sometimes look at it, but most of the time we don't look at it. We just carry on sort of thing. So I felt that was the truest to have.
I often think about the third act in life, like women particularly, how we, in our 50s and 60s, wonder, well, a lot of my friends are saying, Jodie, is this it? Is this what we bought into? Is that, have we maxed out on everything? And we're only in our 50s, and many of my friends are not excited about where they find themselves in their 50s and 60s. And they're asking, what else can we do at this point? How do we take a left turn? How do we have a really dynamic third act? I was writing this book, and I'm not saying that I don't know your age, so I'm not going to say this is your third act. 50s, okay. But just writing a book and having it published feel like something that has taken you down a new path? Does it feel exhilarating? Does it feel like you've accomplished?
It definitely feels new, and I think it has felt a relief probably for my children. Like, the empty nest would have been a warrior. I really loved them being at home, and it's been quite good to have this new project. So,
like a baby, or something to care for?
Yeah, something to grow in that way. Yeah, but that question is very interesting, and we share a friendship with Beth Ann Hardison, who's one of the biggest inspirations.
Does anyone know the name Beth Ann Hardison? She's up here too, in the channel. She's a woman who, a Black woman who did a million things in her life, but one of the things that she's most known for is trying to diversify the fashion industry, from the models on the runway to the masthead of magazines, getting more. She had a documentary recently, and she's a great friend of mine. She's sort of like my mother, second mother. And I introduced her to Emma, and I said, you have to have this woman's story.
Yeah, well, we still haven't done it.
Yeah.
I've been writing a book for a long time, but she's an amazing inspiration. And she has actually, I introduced her to another client, a friend who's writing a book on the old woman you want to be, because I definitely have thought about that, and that was something I wanted. And so it's a series of profiles that look like that who do make it quite appealing, the idea of growing really old.
What was the thing you did not like about writing this book?
Everything faces sort of rejection and odd humiliations, I think, in the process of exposure. That's all quite uncomfortable. It was quite nice.
Like this moment of exposure?
You've been very nice, I'm just so proud. It's helping us, raise my family, do everything. But
do you know people in the audience?
Yes, I do.
Oh, you do? Okay. There's some friends.
Yeah. But yeah, I do find that quite nerve-wracking. I never envied clients being in this position.
You seem so calm.
Be talented.
That's like you take a dummy. I I wanted to ask a question about the lessons of Peggy that can be applied today. So what have we learned about Peggy, or what have you learned about Peggy that can be applied to today?
I think one thing is, of course, like the past is not so different, and it's really fun to go back there and learn about everything we're contending with through that gaze. But also, she helps me remember not to just sort of surrender and submit when we're in a place of war or conflict. It can feel like you just have to relegate responsibility to the men who started it, and you can be sad, you can give some money to charity, you might protest in a way that she couldn't have done then, and you might vote in a way that she couldn't have done then. But I think a lot of us feel a bit kind of paralysed by the anxiety sometimes, and her scheme was an incredibly creative, thoughtful way to achieve peace, and I just think stories like that could do with a bit more airing, because otherwise we do tend to think it's naive to hope for peace, that it's a sort of beauty queen dream and it's female and embarrassing, but the reality is war, and we should all keep quiet. And so I hope
So this is a battle cry for women?
well, I hope we'll flush out other stories of creative initiatives for peace that aren't,
I want to see if there's a question or two in the room. There are. Okay, so I'm gonna pause on my questions. I have a few more, but I'm gonna open it up.
these people need to get to dinner, you know.
We have some time for your questions. Yes.
Well, could you please move the microphone closer to you? You keep on.
Sorry.
Sorry, I understand you. Could you speak a little bit more about what she actually did?
Sorry, so you just missed the last half an hour. All the stress. She learned how to write in code. She kept a line of communication open with the British headquarters in New York, even after those lines had closed, because she was reluctant to lose contact with her friends, and also was just horrified by the idea that all she'd have access to was political propaganda and the various pieties in each paper. And so she kept that line of communication open. She introduced her husband to the head of British intelligence, and she helped convey letters back and forth between them until the plot was achieved. But I don't know if I should say exactly what the plot was, because hopefully you might read it.
Do we want to spoil it?
Okay, yeah.
Let it sit. Yes.
Treason is what she did.
Was there any writer or book that inspired your approach as you
That's a great question.
I mean, everything I ever read, I feel like, is somewhere in the mix, but I wasn't emulating anyone particularly. The only the sort of hope I have for her, or I feel most affectionate about her, is that she would be a character that we can love, even though she got a lot of things wrong, in the way that I love a Scarlett O'Hara or Anna Gables, and through telling her story, the hope is, it's not rigorous history, which I know some people find difficult. It is fiction, but hopefully by bringing that period to life, you learn more. So maybe it's like going to the zoo to learn about animals or something. It's not perfect, but it is a way of making you care about that period.
And I think the blend, we talked about this a while ago, the way you blended fact and then plausible assumptions, right? So did you go through old letters to think about what she possibly could have done? Not her letters per se, but letters of the times and conversations amongst people that would give you a possibility of what she might have said and done. How did you fill in? So there's the skeleton, the base, but
Yeah.
how did you fill in the details?
Yeah, I read a fair bit about sort of 18th century sensibility, which was a notion that was coming into play, and quite a lot of fiction from that time as well as letters. But it is, any historical fiction is a creature of the time it's written to, right? So, and I didn't want it to be all moldy-woldy.
And it's not. That's why I loved it.
Yeah, it's trying to make it seem plausible, but not archaic or anachronistic. Yeah.
There were a lot of exclamation points. This is something I noticed. You used a lot of exclamation points, and when I was writing, Oftentimes I remember. I recall a few times you said, "You look hard to me." Yeah. But it was so light and fun, and I enjoyed it, and I think you should give more exclamation points in your It's a new side of you.
No, you're right though. I find it intolerable, like in a text. Or
You do, right? Yes, I knew it. Yeah.
It sounds like sounding spirit, I think, or cross. Yeah.
Another question from the audience? Yes.
Just thinking about that fiction aspect of it, and in this intense research you were doing, obviously you're drawn to historical fiction, but was there ever a point where you thought, I want to write a biography, or was it?
I mean, I did initially hope to do that because working in publishing, you know, if you write non-fiction, you can sell it on the proposals. That's like 30 to 50 pages rather than 80,000 words. So I definitely hoped to do it as non-fiction initially, but there was too much secret about the scheme, and it just could. You could probably have done it in the way that there are books now where they have the outline of the history and then an author inserting herself to sort of say why she cares. There's a book coming about Emma Parry like that, but I didn't want my own voice in the mix. And once I started doing it in first person, I was struggling, and a friend said, go to a Quaker service. So I did. I went and sat in there's a really lovely Quaker meeting house in Hudson. And I sat in there for an hour or two, and then my voice just came quite quickly.
Yes.
One of the many things I loved about the book was...
Did you finish it?
Yeah! Yeah, I read it all the way through. Was the house form. Like, the fashion, the different houses and how important they were, how detailed you were about talking about, when they have their first family home together, she and Benedict, the house that they end up living in, at West Point. How much research did you do? Did you go to those places? Did you imagine them yourself? I mean, and was that fun for you too? Because I just thought it made it come to life so well.
Yeah, I loved all of that. Thank you. And Mount Pleasant is standing. That was to be their first married home. It's one of the most beautiful Georgian houses, in England or America. I think it's absolutely beautiful. So it was incredible to see that. You can also go to Clydeton, which is where her best friend lived, and we went there, and it actually wasn't open, but the door was, and we did have a good old poke around. And then I was lucky enough, actually, because Josh lived in a Georgian house from the same period in Bath in England, and I think it was amazing to spend time there to think about the light and those windows and the landscape and all the rest of it. Yeah, I loved all of that.
There's a great movie with Tilda Swinton, I Am Love. Has anyone ever seen that? And it's incredibly beautiful, and there was so much formality to the way their houses were set up and the way they lived, and the housekeepers and all of the formality. And although I don't live that way, it was beautiful, and I felt beauty watching it in a movie, and I also felt it and wanted to be in it reading your book, which is strange because I really like living in 2026 in Brooklyn with my family, but I could see myself in that moment.
Yeah, I suppose I don't linger on the inconvenience of the plumbing situation.
Right. I think that we might be pushing time. Do we have anyone have a read on a time frame?
Yes. Yeah.
But I want to read this. How much? Forget it. So there's a line. There are so many lines that are underlined. This one is really funny to me. It says, "This is someone speaking to Peggy. When your time with such men comes, Peggy, listen. Keep your thoughts nimble and find the right time to pitch in. Never freeze, never fawn, and don't talk on and on, however fascinating you are being. Just don't talk on and on." And she's the opposite of that. Inside, she's not stopping. She's not holding herself back. But there's all this protocol around her that requires her to be even more subversive with her determination.
Yeah. And how healthy is that? Because it has to be furtive. I don't know. Yeah, that's part of what I'm hoping as well.
Does she win in the end?
I mean, now she's got this book.
That was a great, really moment to end. But Emma, I know that you may or may not have any last words. You want to tell us something that was on your heart while writing the book, or anything that you feel now, or any regrets, anything that you just did not get out?
No, I don't think so. I'm so grateful
Really?
for coming. I really am. I'm very glad we're almost so done.
Nothing. But that's incredible, because sometimes we have regrets, and I love to hear that you say that you stand by this, you love this.
Well, I already think they ask for paperback corrections. There's a lot I would change if I could in the paperback. You can see things to type and all the rest of it.
Are you talking grammar, diction, or story?
Grammar, diction.
Yeah. There we go.
I might think about this exclamation point again.
I thank you so much for writing this book, Emma. I really love it.